Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
A new government is in place now and it has started acting. And as you would expect, some of the early action is on the national security front. So the new architecture of national security is now coming up, or let me say the existing architecture is now being strengthened and some modifications are carried out. So the highlight, we already know that we have new ministers for defense and home, which are the two key ministries when it comes to national security. But we've also had this very important change today with the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, who comes into his second term now after serving the full first term and has been elevated today in the cabinet rank. So, in the cabinet rank with a 5-year extension, irrespective of the fact that he would have turned 75 in January next year, 5 years. So, you also might ask, who's Ajit Doval? I know there are many legends about him. I will tell you the facts that I know, because in some ways, as I have written a couple of times in the past, our careers have sort of progressed sort of parallelly, even though there is an age gap between us. But as reporters, as journalists, we usually interact with officers much senior to us and relatively older than us. So I followed his career since he was Assistant Director SIB, Subsidiary Intelligence Bureau in Mizoram. And when I first went to cover the Northeast, Brigadier Silo, who was the Chief Minister of Mizoram, said to me that, listen, young man, if your country had more intelligence officers like Doval, things would be a lot better. So wherever he went, he left a reputation. The Chogyal of Sikkim died. I went to cover the funeral in Gangtok. Ajit Doval had just finished his posting there, and I heard similar kind of talk about him there, that he was khurafati, he was always doing stuff, very active person. Then he went to Pakistan, not undercover, absolutely not undercover, legitimately, legally, as a diplomat in charge of commerce and business and industry, which not very much of commerce and trade was happening. So he was doing what he does, and he was at that point keeping track of the Khalistani proliferations there, which Pakistanis were encouraging. And after that got very deeply involved with Sikh terror activity, fighting Sikh terror activity. In fact, the worst point of insurgencies in Punjab, which is 91, 92, when KPS Gill generally gets the credit for having destroyed the insurgency. I sometimes say that for every A or B category terrorist killed at that point, Sikh terrorist killed at that point, I would say Caught Doval, Bold Gill, or if you want, you can also call it Caught Gill, Bold Doval. So they worked in tandem, they did very well. He also had a big moment of glory during Operation Black Thunder. That is when the second time that armed forces were sent inside the Golden Temple to flush it out, and that's when it was not carried out by the army but by the National Security Guard. So those are the things that he did, and those are the things that gave him success. He did a lot of stuff in Burma, China. He is an old hand at operations and built a reputation also for risk taking. Sometimes may have gone too far and may have gone into trouble. We don't have enough time to talk about all that now, but maybe we'll do that at some other point. So with that reputation, in 2004, when UPA came to power in July, he was made Director IB. So he reached the top of the IB, like his mentor for a long time, M.K. Narayanan. And I will tell you a little interesting factoid. Ajit Doval is an IPS officer of the 1968 batch. He comes from the Kerala cadre, just like his mentor M.K. Narayanan. He is also from the Kerala cadre, IPS officer of the Kerala cadre. And now that we are talking about this, I will mention yet another tiny factoid for you. 5 NSAs over 20 years. This is almost like the 20th anniversary of the institution of the office of the NSA. 5 NSAs as yet. IFS officers, Brajesh Mishra, Shiv Shankar Menon, J.N. Dikshit, IFS officers. IPS officers, M.K. Narayanan, Ajit Doval. It's a very interesting fact that in 20 years, 21 years of there being an active NSA, the IAS has never got that job. I'm not complaining, I'm not instigating the IAS, I'm just noting down a fact and underlining it for you. There are many new things there and I will come to that. But before that, let me tell you about how this position has evolved and how does India's national security architecture works, because those are things that usually mystify a lot of people. So if I have to declutter something, let me try and declutter that. First of all, India's national security system works essentially constitutionally at the cabinet level. There is the Cabinet Committee on Security, which has some essential members, which is the Prime Minister, Home, Defence, External Affairs and Finance. And then the Prime Minister can invite anybody to the CCS, anybody of the cabinet rank can be invited to the CCS. Then there are other structures. Now, until 1998, until NDA came to power, sort of for a period, not for 13 days. Until the NDA came to power, India did not have the position of National Security Advisor. So, Home, Defence, etc. brought their inputs to the Prime Minister. The Defence Chiefs usually met the Prime Minister one-on-one. On many issues, the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister presided over many of these meetings. Intelligence Chiefs also were in a way on their own. The IB Chief reported to the Home Minister. The RAW Chief was constitutionally and administratively under the Cabinet Secretary. So there was no one security czar and there was no single point of advice to the Prime Minister on national security. So when Mr. Vajpayee became Prime Minister, he instituted the office of the National Security Advisor in the Prime Minister's office as a key aid to the Prime Minister on issues of national security, pretty much on the pattern of the American system, which has an NSA. And his NSA, as we know, was Brajesh Mishra, India's first NSA. The important thing in that case is that he wasn't just the NSA, he was also Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. So I'm telling you this because I'll tell you that there have been 5 NSAs. Each one had a different, has a variation to the role. So it's not as if NSA's position has had one defined role. So Brajesh Mishra ran national security, foreign policy, was a single point of advice to the Prime Minister, but he also ran the Prime Minister's office and he also ran a lot of his governance, and all the others in the PMO worked under him. When Mr. Vajpayee demitted office, UPA came to power. UPA continued with the office of the National Security Advisor. Now remember, these traditions or these innovations, when one government makes, the next one doesn't necessarily follow them. I'll take you back to Rajiv Gandhi's times. Rajiv Gandhi made a very good innovation in my view. He set up a fairly autonomous office of the Minister of State for Internal Security in the Home Ministry, and that's a job that Arun Nehru had for some time. Then Chidambaram had, a young Chidambaram had for the rest of the time, and later Subodh Kant Sahai also had that job. But once, and then Rajesh Pilot had it under Narasimha Rao. But once the Congress lost power, since then the BJP dropped that job, and that job has never been recreated, to the regret of observers and analysts like me. A Minister of State for Internal Security was abolished, but the NSA that was created by Mr. Vajpayee was continued by the UPA. In fact, the UPA appointed not one but 2 NSAs. One was M.K. Narayanan, who was a former IB chief, and I will bring him back in a bit. And the second was J.N. Dikshit, former Foreign Secretary. Both very thoughtful people, very experienced people. So, as you would expect, Mr. M.K. Narayanan was to focus more on security, defense, those issues, intelligence, terrorism, and J.N. Dikshit on foreign policy issues. Unfortunately, J.N. Dikshit did not serve in that job for too long. He died in harness, and when he passed away, UPA government decided not to fill that position. So his functions also went to Mr. M.K. Narayanan. So he served a term there, performing both the jobs, and became a kind of all-powerful person in the security front, but not with a formal status like that, and I will come to you later to explain to you what I mean. Once he finished his term, he left and sort of plowed into academic work and writing, etc. in Chennai, and he was then succeeded by Shiv Shankar Menon, the former foreign secretary. And as you would expect, he did a lot of, his focus was very strongly on foreign policy areas, being a career diplomat, but he did fill in a gap on defense, because we had in the entire period of UPA, almost barring the first initial period when Pranab Mukherjee was defense minister, A.K. Antony, who was both indecisive and uncommunicative. So Shiv Shankar Menon had to fill in for that also. So with each incumbent, the job was defined differently. So 3 under UPA, 1 under NDA 1, and then 5th under NDA 2, that is Ajit Doval. Now Ajit Doval is very different from the rest in the sense that he was not the first intelligence person, career intelligence person to get this position. He was the second because M.K. Narayanan was the first. But he was the first purely operationally oriented NSA. In fact, in an article I wrote on him, I said that his colleagues remember him as having a particularly Khurafati intelligence mind. So he's always been an operations person. In fact, Avik Sarkar, the publisher of Anand Bazar Patrika and the Telegraph, he once gave me the best description on the relationship that Ajit Doval had with M.K. Narayanan, because M.K. Narayanan was DIB and Ajit Doval was carrying out many operations. So in fact, he said to me the two of them were a great combination, because if Ajit Doval was 007, James Bond, then M.K. Narayanan was M, controlling James Bond, because operations people also need controlling. So Ajit Doval grew into this job, NSA's job. He grew very powerful, and soon enough, we reached a situation where he did preside over the entire security architecture of the country. And in fact, a strategic planning group, a new strategic planning group was set up some time back, and I wrote about it. You can find that article in National Interest. I think it was headlined The Doval Darbar, where we took note of the fact that a lot of the media hadn't taken note of, that this new strategic planning group had been set up under Ajit Doval, which were to include members, secretaries from the key ministries, Home, Defence, Finance, Governor of Reserve Bank of India, and Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary was to implement these decisions. Now remember, before that there was a strategic planning group set up by Vajpayee in 1999, but that group was to be administratively and functionally housed inside the Cabinet Secretariat, and Cabinet Secretary was to preside over it. This was a change. And then as it turned out, it did look like that legal and constitutional sort of provisions were not available right now to really empower this group. That situation has changed today, because earlier NSA was Minister of State rank. Today is Cabinet Minister rank. When it was Minister of State rank, then there was Cabinet Secretary who was also Minister of State rank. So there was a hierarchy issue, but now that Ajit Doval is a full Cabinet Minister, those things vanish. Now what does this mean going ahead? This means, one, I told you there are many firsts. This is the first case of an NSA going into his second term. This is also the first case where one NSA has got a full second term of 5 years. We've already told you it's the first NSA in the office of in the rank of the Cabinet Minister. So the profile of this position has been raised. What it also does is that it clears some confusion, because when Doval was NSA, S. Jaishankar was Foreign Secretary. So in the hierarchy, one was higher, one was lower. Now, if Doval was not upgraded, then Jaishankar would have gone higher and Doval would have remained lower. Now, that asymmetry is gone. Second, what this means is that defense forces have always asked for a chief of defense staff, a single point of security advice to the prime minister. I think this position pretty much fulfills that job. And I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not a great enthusiast for the idea of the CDS because a lot of the security threats to India, in fact, most security threats to India don't come necessarily at its borders or in terms of conventional warfare. Security now is a very complex thing. That matrix needs more than soldiering to address or to counter. So the rise of a national security czar like this with a properly provided constitutional, administrative and legal framework, I think is a very interesting idea and it has very powerful possibilities going ahead. So we now expect many changes in this security structure. I see a growing National Security Council. I see much more of a think tank structure being built around the National Security Council to create more inputs. And I see the three armed forces and the various intelligence agencies now finding one core or centralized office where they share their inputs, etc. So critics would say that this is concentration of too much power. Critics might have a point, but I would say give it time. Because what you have seen now, you have effectively seen the creation of the position of a national security minister, internal as well as external, different from defense, different from home. A national security minister in the full cabinet rank. This is an innovation. It's a very Modi-like innovation. And I think to those of us who study national security and who've covered issues of national security, this is a very interesting and very newsy development. But I thought it was good for me, it was good if I could today lay out all the parameters and matrices for you. If you have questions, I'm sure you have many doubts, questions, please write to me. I will try and answer as well as I can.